Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome. My name is Toshiko Hasagawa, and I'm so pleased to be here with you all during the family hour. It makes me feel so grateful to know that we have folks who are willing to show up when we call them in to be able to provide feedback so that we can be as effective and responsive as possible. I'm a Port of Seattle commissioner, and um, really my heart and my values in centering the voices of people in order to promote both healthy people and a planet is what has brought me to this position. And so it's also what's called me towards this policy. And so welcome and thank you so much for being here. I am truly excited to be able to share with you all today our SCA land stewardship plan and our tree replacement standards. It's been a long time coming. Thank you for your patience. Both of these integrate a port-wide environmental land stewardship principle approved by the commission in by the July by approved by the commission in July earlier this year, and it really is a testament to how we're going to be stewarding our natural resources. I'm a South Seattle resident, a mother, and environmental land stewardship has been important to me personally. And I know that I'm working alongside some amazing professionals at the Port of Seattle who take so much pride in the spirit of this work and what we're bringing to you today. Oftentimes, conversations focus on trees specifically because of their tremendous ecological value and their symbolism for both environmental and public health. And I agree. We must protect trees for the sustainability and quality of life for our communities. And these policies are important steps. It's also about more than trees. It's about how we holistically steward land overall to provide critical habitat, contiguous habitat for native flora and fauna, and really emphasizing forest health, right? So there's the forest and there's also the trees. And for the people who live nearest to the airport and the jurisdictions that we work with, we're doing this for ourselves and for our posterity. So I do, in addition to acknowledging all of you who have been advocates in so many different spaces, including with the Port of Seattle, I'd like to also acknowledge the tremendous work of our environmental team, especially Chipper Maney, who you'll be hearing from later today, Sarah Cox, who will also be speaking, Sandy Kilroy, and of course, Erica Chung. She is commission staff person who's provided support to me over the last 2 years at the commission. And there have been so many other folks who have put eyes, ears, and heart into this body of work over the past year that this has been in development. Um, we really are trying to be intentional about how we're promoting sustainability and community health, but also building on the best practices that we've learned over the course of a lot of time and experiences and feedback. So both our plan and standard are grounded in success stories, particularly wetland management best practices. Increasingly, the work that we're doing on our own properties with our own crews and in the partnership that we have with community members and you. Um, we're also experts in the field. I want to give another huge shout out um, to the port on this body of work because we are the first port in the entire country to document its practices with a land stewardship plan. And I think that that's really impactful because that is the sort of proactive action that can, I think, really be a beacon and help point to us as a leader or a thought leader that for strategies that can be applied in other places. We're seeing more and more cities document land stewardship and consider tree replacement policies anew. But we're the first port to do it. So that's awesome. Um, that's my bit. I plan to be here for the whole meeting. I'll be taking notes. and listening to what your feedback and what your input is. And this will be becoming before the port for reading this upcoming Tuesday, and I hope to see you there as well. And I thank you so very much for meeting us at the table. Have a great conversation.
Thank you, Commissioner, for those opening remarks. So just to quickly go over the agenda and the structure of the meeting here, we're going to provide some background here. Sarah Cox will be providing some background, and then we'll go into the main part of the presentation with the SCA Land Stewardship Plan presented by Chipper Maney, along with the tree replacement standards, and then we'll move into Q&A. So with that, I'll pass it over to Sarah Cox. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, AJ, and also a big thanks to Commissioner Hasagawa for your ongoing support to move this program forward. And I would also like to express my gratitude for those of you joining us this evening. But we are very excited to have you here tonight. We are sharing the Sea-Tac Airport's Land Stewardship Plan and tree replacement standards with you because we really want your feedback. As community members and organizations, your input will provide a unique perspective that can really help strengthen this program. Next slide, please. So as you're aware, the port operates essential transportation infrastructure to ensure the efficient movement of people and goods in our region. And we must utilize our land for development and operations. But at the same time, there are a number of regulatory requirements set by state and federal mandates that we must continue to meet. And through this, as an organization, we recognize the importance of balancing our operations and development with our commitment to responsible land stewardship and environmental health. What you'll hear tonight is our plan to go above and beyond those regulatory requirements. I would like to note this is not new work for the port. For many years, environmental health and land stewardship has been a priority. Since 2006, Sea-Tac Airport has planted almost 33,000 trees and restored close to 214 acres of primarily forested habitat. These programs we are presenting tonight formalize our commitment and ensure we continue to prioritize the holistic health of our resources. Next slide, please. As Commissioner Hasagawa noted, in July, the Commission adopted our environmental land stewardship principles. These are applied port-wide and offer guidance for decision-making to ensure we're integrating caring for our land with our ongoing operations. These guiding principles emphasize a comprehensive approach, ensure integration into our capital process, include equity and community partnerships, and prioritize a holistic ecological approach to land management. Next slide, please. So tonight, these items speak directly to our work at Sea-Tac Airport. As you can see on this slide, the airport's property extends across many jurisdictions, including the city of Sea-Tac, Burien, Des Moines, and Auburn. But I would like to note that these plans do not apply to North Sea-Tac Park. And this is due to the park is a leased property. It's maintained by the city of Sea-Tac, and there's no change in the status of any aspect of the park based on these proposed policies. But as you can see on the slide, our footprint includes a number of different natural resources and land uses that equates to almost 1,400 acres of vegetation, or almost 50% of our Sea-Tac Airport property. But I really would like to emphasize that portions of these vegetated surfaces are regulatory protected, and others, such as the light green shaded areas in between the airport's infield, this grassy surface, these serve as filter strips for our stormwater treatment. And many portions of our properties with tree canopy and wetland sites are protected and are not subject to further development. Examples of this are the 60 acres in Auburn and many segments along the west side of the airport. Out of this land use cover, approximately 18% is available for stewardship. And as you can see, the airport has many land uses to manage. With all these various land uses and natural resources on our properties, it is critical for us to develop a mechanism to understand current conditions and site opportunities where we can optimize environmental benefits in balance with our operations and development. I am now excited to pass it on to Chipper Maney, our Natural Resources Program Manager, who will share our land stewardship plan and our recommended tree replacement standards.
Thank you, Director Cox. Please allow me a second to acknowledge the advocacy and leadership of Commissioner Hasagawa and Director Cox for this program. And I would also like to add a personal statement. My kids grew up in Burien. My mother still lives in Des Moines. So this is not just a professional work for me. This is close to my heart and my community. The commission order to adopt land stewardship principles included supporting strategies that were intended to build a strong and comprehensive foundation for land stewardship port-wide. Two of the strategies are specific to the airport and are to come before commission for adoption after the public engagement period. Those strategies are the land stewardship plan and the SCA tree replacement standards. So today, please allow me to run through the approaches for both, starting with the plan. And just a reminder, land stewardship at the airport is defined as the sustainable management of ecological resources balanced with the airport's operational and development needs. The plan provides a framework supporting the comprehensive application of land stewardship activities across all airport programs, particularly site maintenance planning and capital development projects. The plan recognizes that the airport has a unique operational and development environment and balances those regional needs with the ecological and community benefits provided by land stewardship in the vicinity of the airport. The following slides provide an overview of the plan's approach and methodologies, and the complete plan is also being made available to you for detailed review of the inventory and approach described in tonight's webinar. And let me just please remind you that you can feel free to submit comments and questions in the meeting chat as we're giving the presentation. And you can continue to provide comments as you think about the presentation after we're done. Thank you. Next slide. Again, the land stewardship principles adopted by Commission earlier this summer provided guidelines for the plan, which demonstrates the port's commitment to going well beyond minimum regulatory compliance. The plan also recognizes that the airport has a legal and policy obligation to develop infrastructure to support safe and efficient flight operations and seeks to improve the sustainability of the operations and development at the airport. Improving the sustainable management of our resources in the face of significant development pressure will enhance and restore ecological productivity and increase community benefits of the open space that provides a buffer between the communities and the airport operations and development. The plan's objectives include inventory and tracking and annual reporting of stewardship achievements. A baseline inventory has already been completed using 2021 data, and the inventory is also used to inform planning and analysis for the subsequent objectives in the plan. Those objectives include protecting existing habitat from further degradation while also enhancing and restoring its function. This is best accomplished, in our view, by focusing on contiguous habitat along our highly regulated stream corridors, and we'll see why this is the case in later slides. Stewardship outcomes can also be improved through community partnerships that allow coordinated planning and implementation of land stewardship actions beyond our airport property in our neighboring communities. For example, we're currently working with community members to salvage native plants from a future development site and replant them in a city park. The airport also maintains community stewardship sites and sponsors community tree planting and invasive maintenance events at the sites annually. While the previous objectives primarily emphasize planning and voluntary stewardship actions, the plan recognizes the airport necessity for development to support operations. This is necessarily going to require unavoidable tree clearing. For this reason, the last objective in the plan establishes goals and actions that mitigate and offset the effects of tree clearing required for operations and development. Next slide. The plan uses an approach with 4 components. It first provides an inventory of land use and land cover using 2021 satellite imagery. The information is used to establish baseline conditions and to support delineation of management units with common land use and resource attributes. The plan categorizes those management units based on their stewardship potential, and sites with stewardship potential are further analyzed to identify specific actions and opportunities that are available. It is important to understand that the plan evaluates all property at SEA for land stewardship potential, and that potential ranges from no potential in areas like the airfield where airplanes are landing to high potential in areas with significant ecological resources that are typically regulated. Next slide. We designated 48 distinct management units that have unique land use and ecological characteristics. The land use characteristics included operational requirements and constraints, developing and redeveloping sites, and community equity attributes. Ecological characteristics that we inventoried included regulated streams, wetlands, and buffers, as well as the extent of tree canopy and other vegetative cover. The vegetation was also evaluated to quantify its condition, including the amount of tree canopy and the level of invasive threat. The management units were organized into 4 categories with differing potential for stewardship. Next slide. The airfield is highly restricted and has very limited to no potential for stewardship. Ground lease development sites are also maintained by the lessee or the third-party developer under the terms and conditions of the lease. And so the port doesn't have real mechanisms for implementing stewardship actions in either of those areas. While we can't maintain forest on development sites or on the airfield, the development sites do have a degree of stewardship potential. Stewardship potential involves active maintenance and property management to maintain the maximum allowable tree canopy in the landscaping areas around buildings, roadways, and parking lots, and the management of public safety and security, which includes programmatic implementation of illegal disposing of debris from illegal dumping, actively securing sites to prevent the illegal dumping in the first place and other disturbances, limbing trees and removing dead snags to mitigate hazards to human life and health and infrastructure is also an important component at developed sites. While these maintenance and property management actions aren't glamorous, they do protect the resources from being degraded over time. The plan also specifically calls out North Sea-Tac Park as a distinct management area. As Director Cox said, the port leases this property to the city of Sea-Tac, and the city administers the property as a park and is responsible for the park's maintenance and upkeep. The port, in coordination with the city, funded a nonprofit group to develop an urban forest management plan for the city that identifies stewardship opportunities in the city's parks and other public spaces. So the stewardship planning for North Sea-Tac Park is actually contained in that plan of the cities, and so is not evaluated as part of the airport's land stewardship plan. Areas with significant land stewardship potential are categorized as ecological. These areas typically have highly regulated streams, wetlands, and their protective upland buffers, which are often forested, that limit potential for economic development. Depending on the specific site attributes, these sites may include existing protected areas that have already been built for projects like the third runway and flight corridor safety. And these sites have been restored to a natural condition, but nonetheless, they require long-term stewardship to protect and maintain the resource functions. Other sites have stream and wetland habitat that could be used for mitigation in the future. and these sites often also include upland forest in need of maintenance to protect and enhance the ecological function and provide community benefits. Next slide. So what we find when we roll up these land use categories is that they reflect a pattern of land use and land cover at the airport that has motivated our approach to the overall land stewardship planning and evaluation. The ecological areas predominantly occur in large tracts of land along the stream habitat corridors, which include associated wetlands and are highly regulated at the federal, the state, and the local level. So for that reason, we propose taking a holistic approach to stewarding these areas that emphasizes landscape scale forest health, or more broadly, habitat function. The plan's approach aims to maintain and enhance the health of those resources in three ways: by removing ivy and other invasives threatening the life of existing trees. Often these trees are large native conifers, the protection of which maintains significantly more function than planting new trees. There's also a lot of potential to restore native understory plants to areas infested with blackberry and ivy and other species that overtake and prevent the establishment of a native plant community. Obviously, then, such work also would enable tree planting to increase canopy cover over time. These actions in aggregate improve biodiversity, structural diversity, site productivity, habitat availability, and forest regeneration, among a myriad of other ecosystem services that provide community benefits. Next slide. The sites with stewardship potential, including the development sites, were further evaluated to create site plans that identify the type and extent of stewardship opportunities. The site plans inventory existing site resources, evaluate the health of those resources in order to evaluate the specific opportunities available to us for stewardship. Although the site plans have many potential uses and values, they are primarily intended to be used two ways. They first support the development of our annual stewardship work plans, and second, they inform capital projects, preliminary planning and design by identifying regulated resources and providing information to support scoping, cost estimates, and design criteria. Next slide. The plan also evaluates the potential for sites, the relative potential for sites to enhance ecological function and provide community benefits. We essentially give each site a score that allows us to rank them based on the amount of benefit that stewardship would provide at that site to the community. The ecological criteria we use to evaluate site potential emphasizes the LSP objective to connect and expand habitat. Importantly, much of the focus of the plan is on land resources, forests, and wetlands. While that is true, the plan also considers stream habitat, salmon, and other aquatic life by identifying the potential for removing fish passage barriers along our streams. In the past 10 years, the port has replaced 4 fish passage barriers on Miller Creek, either removing them completely or replacing them with bottomless structures with natural stream beds passable by salmon. Consistent with land stewardship principles, we have also applied equity criteria to our site evaluations. Sites are scored based on their potential to improve the port's equity index score, to improve areas that are physically or visually accessible to the public, and to enhance urban heat island effects. The sites that have the greatest potential for ecological lift and community benefits can be prioritized for stewardship activities, whether that be voluntary actions or mitigating operational and development impacts. Site plans provide information to support annual stewardship work plans, and more importantly, can be used to support capital project planning by identifying the regulated environmental resources. Which brings us to our next topic. The land stewardship plan, as I have said previously, doesn't focus exclusively on just our ecological areas. Development sites, while more constrained, nonetheless have stewardship potential. We have already demonstrated that existing development can be maintained to prevent the degradation of resources and maximize stewardship potential through active and rigorous maintenance and property management. However, developing and redeveloping sites are required to support airport operations must necessarily clear trees. As such, both the principles and the land stewardship plan objectives require actions to be implemented to mitigate the effects of tree clearing from operations and development. Specifically, the ecological and community benefits of trees cleared for operations and development must be replaced. The following slides describe the approach to the airport's tree replacement standards, and the formal policy language is being made available for your review and comment as well. Next slide. Typically, city municipal codes require tree replacement as part of their development standards for site clearing and grading. All cities surrounding the airport have adopted tree replacement requirements in their development standards. These standards generally are consistent in requiring a maximum 3-to-1 tree replacement ratio for any tree cleared for development. Airport properties are subject to those city standards in the cities in which the development occurs. There is an exception to this. It's the airport activity area identified in blue on the slide figure. The airport activity area is administered through the interlocal agreement between the port and the city of Sea-Tac. The agreement designates the airport's building department as the jurisdictional authority in the airport activity area shown in blue on the figure. Currently, there are no formalized or authorized tree replacement standards for the airport activity area. Absent those rules, in the past, SEA has determined tree replacement requirements through environmental review or other processes, and this has led to inconsistent and therefore sometimes contentious outcomes. So the proposed tree standard corrects this inconsistency and fills the gap in tree replacement regulation to ensure that all trees removed on airport property, regardless of jurisdiction, are required to be replaced. Next slide. The objectives of the regulations are to retain existing trees on the development sites to the extent feasible, and then replace the ecological and community benefits of trees that are required to be cleared. And so the next slides are going to focus on that replacement requirement. Staff followed a number of guidelines in developing the tree replacement standard. Recognizing that significant replacement actions will require the use of sites in the airport's existing ecological areas, the standards align to the principles and the land stewardship plan objectives by applying a holistic ecological approach that emphasizes maintaining and enhancing forest health. Focusing on maintaining and enhancing the health of forested areas is also consistent with our understanding of existing community feedback, which recognizes that invasive species are widespread and are degrading our forest resources. The land stewardship principles also ask us to exceed the typical minimum regulatory requirements, which we are interpreting in this instance to be the typical standard requiring a 3-to-1 tree replacement ratio. That is, for every tree cleared, 3 must be planted in replacement. This is the general standard for our region, although there is considerable variation across land uses and jurisdiction. Last, the approach should result in a general equivalence between the area of tree canopy cleared and the area of land required for replacement. Those guidelines balance operations and development with land stewardship by facilitating the responsible use of ecological, community, and economic resources. In regard to what we're regulating as a tree, the board is consistent with the standards of its partner cities, which generally require that trees with a trunk diameter greater than 6 inches at breast height be replaced. Next slide. In terms of how we're approaching replacement, the proposed standards exceed the city requirements of 3-to-1 by requiring trees to be replaced at a 4-to-1 ratio. The proposed standards also reflect the land stewardship principles and objectives in the plan by applying a forest health approach to replacement. The accompanying photo on the slide is an example of a habitat area where we might do restoration, large-scale tree replacement restoration. The area has some existing canopy that is threatened by ivy. As you can see, the ivy growing up the trees, and the native forest plants have been choked out by blackberry and other invasive species. The existing trees planted in this area are going to be killed by the ivy eventually, and no new trees will grow to replace them. To top it off, we know that the new trees planted in such an area would have a low chance of survival. On the other hand, the area has very high stewardship potential to increase tree canopy and restore a native forest if a holistic ecological approach is applied. To do that, tree planting must be accompanied by the protection of the existing trees from invasive threats and the restoration of the understory to a native plant community. Only then will we be able to plant trees to increase canopy and replace the lost function of capital projects. Therefore, the proposed standard applies a credit-based approach to tree replacement, where projects can generate replacement credits one of three ways. The project can plant a new tree, the project can plant the life of an existing tree from invasive threats, or the project can remove broad areas of invasives and restore a native forest understory. So the replacement credits can you please go back to the previous slide? The replacement credits can be generated by implementing one of those three stewardship actions. So one tree planted would generate one credit. Similarly, one tree protected from ivy by removing the ivy from it would generate one credit. And then obviously removing approximately 200 square feet of invasives and replacing that with a native understory vegetation, shrubs, and herbaceous plants like ferns would also generate one credit. And that 200 square feet of we determine that area as the area that generates a stewardship credit because it is commensurate to the canopy area of one mature tree. This approach is a bit complex, so we want to provide an example to illustrate how the replacement would work. To demonstrate what we expect the approach to look like in practice, we developed a tree replacement scenario as an example. The site in black was surveyed as part of the Land Stewardship Plan site inventory. And along with the existing development, you can see in the picture, the site contains approximately 29 acres of tree canopy. Strictly for the purposes of this example, to demonstrate the approach, we assume that the 2,650 trees would be cleared. Again, there is no current plan to develop this site. This is just an example. As the red ink on the slide shows, to replace the 2,650 trees, you would need 10,600 credits, which is 4 times the amount of trees cleared. Those credits are accumulated through a combination of tree planting and forest restoration activities to protect existing trees and restore invasive areas. The credits must add up to at least 4 times the number of trees cleared. These replacement numbers generally show that the approach conceptually meets the minimum 3-to-1 tree replacement standard and then exceeds it with supporting actions that increase ecological function. In this case, forest health. Next slide. While some tree planting will occur on the development site, we anticipate significant replacement actions would require additional area. The principles, the environmental land stewardship principles adopted by Commission recommend that tree replacement be conducted, prioritize locations directly adjacent to the development footprint where the clearing is occurring. This produces a number of potential positive outcomes, including visually buffering operational areas from the public, providing a visual aesthetic to the public as well as to the people using the development site. And from an equity perspective, the health and wellness of employees could also be improved by the visual aesthetics and potentially even physical access to the green space during their work breaks. The land stewardship plan also identifies off-site locations with the potential to be used for tree replacement projects. The off-site locations, again, these locations are on port property, but distant from, by off-site, we mean distant from the development footprint. The off-site locations, again, often mostly occur along or contiguous to regulated stream habitat corridors. Next slide. So that wraps up our approach. Again, you're going to have the opportunity. This is a high-level discussion of the approach. You're going to have an opportunity to review the land stewardship plan in detail in all its glory. And you'll also have the opportunity to review the formal tree replacement policy language that is proposed to come before Commission for adoption. I'm going to pass it back to AJ now, our relatively new environmental affairs manager at the airport, to describe our public engagement process moving forward. Thanks, AJ.
Thank you, Chipper. Well done. So in terms of next steps, we've been tracking the questions here, some of the questions here, and so we'll get to those, and we'll have our staff here available to answer some of these questions that have come through the chat. But I also, one person asked a question about when will some of these materials be posted online or they'll be available to the public. We will have these, we'll be sending a link via email through people that are registered through for this event. We'll be sending that out tomorrow, where it'll take you to where these documents are going to live. So you'll be able to access them and review them. And then we have an open feedback period through November 22nd, where you'll be able to review these documents and then provide comment up until then. And we're asking that you please send your questions, comments to the email here provided. For those of you who are maybe joining by phone, it's environmentsea@portseattle.org. And we also have wanted to let folks know that we have a community tree planting event scheduled for Saturday, December 2nd. You can go to our events page. I think the link actually just went up today. But it's on our Port of Seattle events page where people can sign up and register for that as well. And we'll actually, what we could probably do too is send that link in the link that goes out tomorrow where people can find the document. So you have everything all in one place. And I also just wanted to mention these documents or these issues will come up to the commission, Port of Seattle Commission, on December 12th. Just wanted to make that clarification. So that's the current schedule as of now. And so we welcome any feedback, any questions. And with that, we will get right into some of the questions that were posted here. We have about 15 minutes left, so it gives us ample time to get to some of these. So I'm going to go ahead and read some of these questions that have come in, and our director of aviation, environment, and sustainability program, Sarah Cox, will take a stab at answering them. So the first question we have is from Rick. What development projects are you aware of that are expected that will result in tree clearing?
Thank you, AJ, and thank you, Rick, for your question. Well, one example is in the Sustainable Airport Master Plan. There are some projects both on the airport footprint and on nearby port-owned property. That is an example of some possible development, as Chipper noted, but the SAM, Sustainable Airport Master Plan near-term projects, is only in environmental review now. We're anticipating that draft will go out in Q4 for your review. And some other examples would be utility-related projects, for example. Right.
Did we lose you, Sarah?
Oh,
Oh,
am
there
I
you go.
here?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. I guess they're those were the types of projects that would have potential development activity on them with tree removal.
Thank you. All right, we have another question here. I'm sorry, I'm just navigating through the chats here. Bear with me. So the next question is from Kate. Tree cover used to go a ways blocking some of the noise pollution. Since the port has removed thousands of trees and apparently lately has been using the third runway, noise, including all the way to Gregory Heights, has become most obnoxious. Will you be monitoring any noise mitigation efforts?
Well, we currently have, I believe it's 24 noise monitors where we're constantly monitoring the noise around the airport, and we can put that link into the chat of that program. It's a live program. And then for noise mitigation, we're actually, many of the mitigation actions are regulated by FAA, and we have, it's called Part 150. It's a noise land use study, and we are kicking that off in 2024. So there will be a lot of community engagement and outreach regarding our noise program.
Thanks, Sarah. So the next question is also from Kate. If planes take off and land along parallel approaches, fewer trees would need replacing, especially those trees which serve as carbon sinks. It seems an increasing number of planes are cutting corners on takeoff. Is that why, I presume FAA calls this shot, so many larger trees get removed?
So, okay, I think I'm going to try to answer. I think I'm understanding your question. So FAA regulates the flight paths, and with respect to that, the FAA also regulates the airspace, and when obstructions may penetrate the airspace for safety, we are required, and it's through our flight corridor safety program, to evaluate potential penetrations, and those include buildings. They include a variety of sources besides trees that could be considered a penetration, and that is when we remove trees as part of the flight corridor program, and to ensure that we're meeting the FAA safety requirements for obstructions in the airspace.
Thanks, Sarah. I think we have, there's a couple more questions we're just trying to navigate here. Let's see here.
I have one, AJ, I can read it.
Thank you, Chipper.
There was a question about contiguous habitat corridors, seems to indicate Des Moines Creek Business Park development. I'm sorry, I messed that up. The contiguous habitat corridors map indicates Des Moines Creek Habitat Corridor without acknowledging current plans for development of a fourth parcel of Des Moines Creek Business Park. The development will negatively impact current wildlife habitat, diminish critical tree canopy, and totally change the character of the Des Moines Creek Barnes Creek Trail. So that was the comment. there wasn't a question there, but I think I can make an attempt to respond to that. You are correct that that habitat is shown on the contiguous habitat corridor. The Des Moines Creek Business Park site doesn't have a significant amount of regulated resources. The way that those developments work is that the port leases them to a third party, the developer, and then the developer is responsible for conducting the environmental review and permitting with the jurisdictional authorities, whether that be state, local, or federal. So the tree replacement for that project is regulated through the city of Des Moines clearing and grading standards. And I believe that they're replacing those trees cleared on that site at the city standard of 3:1. I would also say that that project has, in addition to the development footprint, there's a secondary area that comprises about 1/3 of the site through which the trail that you referenced passes through. That trail is actually being maintained, and the green space around it, or this is my understanding of the plan of the developer, is the trail is being maintained and the green space around the trail is also being maintained and will be part of the tree replacement action. So the trail through that Des Moines Creek Business Park site will actually remain in place and be improved as part of the development project. Let's see. The Auburn mitigation area, here's the second question. The Auburn mitigation area, while beneficial to the environment, has done virtually nothing for the impacted residents of the adjacent cities. Going forward, are offsite areas to be required to be within the adjacent impacted cities? That's a good question. So it's a bit complex, and let me see if I can attempt to give it an easy answer. The Auburn site was required by the federal government to be constructed in Auburn to replace waterfowl function. That function cannot be replaced at the airport because of flight safety rules. And so all the remaining functions that were impacted as part of the third runway project are actually replaced on site at the airport. It was really only the waterfowl function was the reason that the Auburn site was built. And that Auburn site actually does, I would also characterize Auburn as an impacted community in South King County. The Auburn residents use the airport, the airplanes fly over the city of Auburn. And so there is some benefit and offset of the impacts of the Auburn community from that mitigation site. Yeah, so I'll just leave that at that. Thank you, Auburn. Let's see. So the next question. So the last part of that question, sorry, was going forward, are offsite areas to be required to be within the adjacent impacted cities? So that's a good question and brings up a point of clarification. When we referenced offsite areas in the presentation, what we were talking about was distant from the development footprint. And so our expectation is for the tree standards, the tree replacement that's required for the airport jurisdiction, that those trees would be replaced on airport property around in the vicinity of the airport. So by offsite, what we mean is that the trees can't be replaced on the development site because the replacement requirement is too great. So what we need to do then is either go to an adjacent open space next to the development site, or even a little more distant from that if there's no adjacent land available to conduct the replanting. But the intent for the replacement standard described in the presentation is that all the trees would be replaced in the vicinity of the airport. Let's see, I haven't read this question yet, so hopefully, the third question is, if removal of ivy and other invasive weeds is done in fragmented areas without a comprehensive plan to maintain a contiguous area for the long term, including restoring proper canopy and understory, the weeds will just grow back. How do you ensure that the tree replacement actions will have adequate follow-up? That's a great question and points directly to a point that I forgot to mention in my spiel. So I apologize for that. These large-scale restoration actions that may occur if there's significant tree clearing from a project would be subject to a 5-year performance monitoring period. So just like we're trying to mirror wetland mitigation framework for conducting a functionally based tree replacement that looks at a holistic ecological approach to forest health. We also are going to require a performance monitoring period for those sites. And the performance monitoring standards include 80% tree survival and no more than 10% invasive cover on the site. And if we're unable to meet those performance standards within the 5-year performance monitoring period, then the performance monitoring period will be extended until the performance standards are achieved.
Chipper, there was a question that just came in. I think that was relevant to what you're just talking about. Is 5 years adequate for monitoring given the dynamics of climate change?
We do feel that 5 years is adequate to determine the establishment of the vegetation. What I would say is that we recognize that these sites occur in an urban area and that there's a high degree of disturbance either on the boundaries or some sort of a disturbance that is going to continue to require these sites to be maintained over the long term in perpetuity as long as the port owns the property. So the land stewardship plan not only includes plans to restore degraded areas of forest, actively maintain and a rigorous maintenance and property management programs for the built environment. We also are developing a long-term stewardship plan for our mitigation areas. So for example, the third runway has about 177 acres of mitigation area that was constructed to replace wetlands that were filled to build the third runway. Those areas have recently completed their 15-year performance monitoring period, and I'm happy to say that the sites are highly successful. But we recognize that those sites, over the next 50 years, 100 years, and perpetuity means forever, that those sites are going to continue to be have the potential to be degraded by disturbance around their edges. And so we are creating, as part of the land stewardship plan, a long-term stewardship plan for our mitigation sites once they leave their performance monitoring period. So just to restate that again, we will continue to provide active maintenance of our ecological areas over the long term. And so again, that is really the whole intent of this plan, is to provide information and a basis and a framework to conduct and implement that type of planning.
All right, thanks, Chipper. We are just about at time. Again, we encourage you to please continue to send questions, comments via the environment SCA@portseattle.org. We have just a couple follow-up questions here. We did receive some comments about the timeline. We appreciate the feedback, and we're going to take that into consideration as we move on throughout this process. Ultimately, this is these plans are subject to commission approval, so that's ultimately going to determine the timeline. But we will take into account all the comments and questions we received through November 22nd. And I think, Sarah, did you want to close with just one more? With the answer to
I wanted to follow
question?
up on just a couple items, because one was related to North Sea-Tac Park and the BMX, mountain bike area, rugby field, etc. There is no development plans in North Sea-Tac Park at this time. There's no development plans in North Sea-Tac Park. And as Chipper noted in the land stewardship section, that this does fall under the City of Sea-Tac long-term lease as a park area. And then the next question I wanted to follow up on was regarding the flight corridor safety program and the number of trees that were removed in the last 5-year cycle. It was less than 1,000 trees that were removed during that program.
Just to add to that, yes, on port property, the port has removed approximately 800 trees, a little less than 800 trees, and we replanted almost 4,000 trees and restored 19 acres of vegetated area to native vegetation as part of that mitigation action. So we cleared about 800 trees, planted almost 4,000, including 19 acres of invasive maintenance and replanting.
Thank you, Chipper.
All right. Thanks, Chipper. Thanks, Sarah, for taking on those questions. Again, appreciate everybody taking their time to join us this evening, and have a good rest of your night.
AJ, can you please talk about how folks can access these materials, accessibility of the maps, accessibility of the plan, where folks can go to receive information and continue to provide feedback, how this feedback today has been captured and how it will be used. And I'm also seeing folks request to be able to kind of be able to see or capture what's gone on in the chat as well.
So, yeah, thank you, Commissioner. So the document, everyone that's RSVP'd through the link that was sent out will get a link to a website where these documents, the land stewardship plan and the tree replacement guidelines, will be posted. And there we'll have access to the full plan and be able to provide comment via email, the email address that was posted earlier on the previous slide, environmentsca@portseattle.org, through November 22nd.
Thank you so much to everyone for your participation today. And I look forward to seeing the summaries and look forward to hearing more from you and seeing this in public forum as well. Thank you.